Good morning and welcome back to day 5 of the Sunshine Readathon. I have just finished reading the final 3 stories in Common Bonds, which is very much a 5-star book. I am so happy to say that, as it was my pick for the 5-star prediction challenge within the Readathon, it has met my expectations. I am giving this 5 stars because, oh my god, it was fantastic as a collection, as the individual stories inside it. I loved it so very much. So I will talk about the 3 final stories and a poem that I read yesterday but that I forgot to mention because it was very, very short, but I will do that now. As usual, I will go in the order that I read them. So first was Discography by Ian Marler, which was a poem rather than a short story. This is a very, very brief poem, but it felt it made me feel things. This is a very, very short reflection on the ways that society centres romance and love, and the fact that being aromantic means that you just don't understand huge portions of the world. You don't understand why things matter the way they do. I don't want to say too much because it's a very short poem, but the final line is just, I will never know what all your favourite songs are about. And that really hit me. I've really enjoyed the fact that Common Bonds as an anthology has centred the fact that life and love and relationships can all be beautiful and meaningful and fulfilling, even if romance doesn't feature. So this one poem that actually gets into the disconnect and the sadness that can come from being aromantic was beautiful, and I really appreciated it to show that it isn't always easy to enjoy your life the way it is. I really, really liked it. I thought it was beautifully crafted for a 6 or 7 line poem, and yeah, great. Next was the short story Seams of Iron by Adriana C. Gregore. This was beautiful and I really, really liked it. It gave me that feeling of all the classic folk tales like the 12 Dancing Princesses and the Red Shoes and that kind of thing. This was a short story about a cursed seamstress who comes across a witch who has also been cursed one day. The seamstress, when she was 16, got caught up in something that she didn't do, but as a result she was equally punished along with the people who had done it. And her curse was that she could only sew things that she was going to give to other people, and that the only thing she could sew them with was weeds and nettles. So she has spent the last, I think it's 10 years at that point, destroying her hands to make clothing to give to other people that magically turns into fabric once she's completed it, and that she must give to them as a way of repenting for this selfish thing that the sorceress thought she had done. The way that she bonds with the witch over their shared condition of having been cursed was really, really wholesome, and I loved that sort of vaguely medieval D&D fantasy feeling to the story, and the folklorish elements of it as well felt so, I don't want to say realistic because obviously they're not realistic, but it felt so grounded in a real knowledge of folklore that it made complete sense that Erin was punished in the way that she was, and so was Sigrun, and I thought it was fantastic. I loved the subtle aromantic representation of Sigrun saying that she had been cursed to never love anyone, but that actually she almost felt relief that she would no longer be able to have feelings for someone because she didn't think that she'd felt them anyway. So I thought that was a really, really lovely tie-in with the idea of being cursed for feeling the way that you feel. And it had a very, very wholesome ending, and I really, really liked this one. Next was Not to Die by Rosie Thor. This was one of the darker stories within the collection. It focuses around a woman named Ursa whose brother and sister-in-law had died about 10 years previously. She doted on her brother and her sister-in-law. She loved them dearly and they were her family, and so for them to be killed in a war sent her into a grieving spiral that she didn't really know how to break out of. So she went to the perennial market, a marketplace where time does not pass, and sat there and did her work as effectively a fortune teller. She would weave these little thread bracelets that would show the path of two people's relationship with each other. Not whether it would be good or whether it would be happy, but just how it was going to pan out. So she spent these 10 years dabbling in other people's relationships, trying not to get over the death of her brother and sister-in-law, until she meets a young woman named Prima, who asks to be apprenticed to her, and Ursa refuses, but in doing so she begins to question her choice to remain forever stuck in the past, to not be able to grow old, to not be able to die. I wouldn't say necessarily that she does heal in the story, but that she is put onto a path of healing. And yeah, this was a lot darker because it focused heavily on grief and on Ursa's apathy towards life that came from the death of her brother and sister-in-law. I thought it was a really nice way of showing that family doesn't have to be a husband, a wife, children, but focused instead on siblings and her love for her brother and her love for the person that her brother had fallen in love with, which I thought was incredibly wholesome. The world building in this one was a little bit more difficult for me to get into, not entirely sure why, but by the time I understood it, I thought it was really good and I very much enjoyed it. And then the final story within Common Bonds was called Busy Little Bees by Palenth Blake. This one was a lot weirder than the others, just in terms of the approach to platonic, familial, non-romantic relationships. This is the story of a girl named Chrysanthemum who is a clone. This is set in a world where cloning has become a norm and people will just regularly clone themselves and give birth to a version of themselves. Chrysanthemum did not like her childhood growing up with a mother who wanted her to be a perfect incarnation of herself, and so Chrysanthemum feels that she has failed in that way, and so she decides to go out and look for the other clones that I believe were created by her mother, in an attempt to find some kind of family in these other rejected forms of her mother. It was a little bit difficult to work out exactly how it worked within the story, but I think it's one of those things where if I reread it, it would make a lot more sense. The story is called Busy Little Bees because Chrysanthemum refers to herself and her fellow clones as bees because the company that makes them is known as the Hive. So there's a lot of talk about sort of natural selection and about the process of building up a hive, of creating a like-minded body of people, and it was really, really interesting as a way of talking about similarities within families and about the differences as well. Chrysanthemum finds people who look very, very similar to her, including someone who is almost identical to her mother, but who has a personality very much not like what her mother wanted and all that kind of thing. In a way, I think it was an exploration of abusive parents in many ways and of being unable to live up to the expectations your parents have of you. Similarly, it is a real bonding point between her and her siblings, the fact that none of them were what was wanted and that they have all ended up on completely different paths despite supposedly sharing so much genetic material. This wasn't one of my favourites just because, again, I'm not massively into sci-fi and I'm especially not into sort of dystopian future societies portrayed in science fiction, but I thought it was a really interesting exploration of siblinghood and of family relationships, even if I didn't entirely understand it. So yeah, that is all the stories within Common Bonds that I have now talked about, and I'm so glad that I got to share my thoughts on all these little stories. I feel like I have been just within the bounds of letting you know what they're about without spoiling them, because I want to generate interest for this book. I think that Common Bonds is just such a special thing to exist, a story that focuses entirely on aromanticism and on platonic relationships, and on the ways that love is so much more than just dating someone. And yeah, if there's anything that I can do, it would be to make sure that more people read this, that more people get to see interesting, diverse, thoughtful, heartfelt representation. Anyway, as I've now finished the collection, it's 5 stars. I can tell without any hesitation it is a 5-star collection, and that means I have ticked off the Read a 5-star prediction challenge for the Readathon. Woo! 3rd challenge down! So, for the rest of the day, I am going to read What a Time to Be Alone by Chidera Egeru, because this is the book I have chosen for the Read a Book in its entirety in one day challenge. It is mostly comprised of sort of graphic design and beautiful representation of words rather than as a strict prose book. So I think it should be pretty easy for me to get through, maybe in a couple of sittings today, and I can tick it off the list. This is also the only book that I plan to read for the readathon that came from my physical TBR as it stood before I started buying books for this. I'm going to take a little break and I will be back with you when I am reading What a Time to Be Alone. Well, would you believe it? It has been not very long since I filmed the last clip and my mum just came upstairs with a parcel that had arrived. So, one of the books I ordered has arrived. From the size of it, I am pretty sure this is in fact the book that I was planning to read instead of What a Time to Be Alone, but that I had given up on waiting for because What a Time to Be Alone had been on my pile for reading for so long anyway. But this is awesome. I may try to read both this book and What a Time to Be Alone today. I don't know. I think that would be a reasonable challenge, but that I would be able to do it. Anyway. Book unboxing. Heck yeah, this is the book that I thought it was going to be. This is Odes to Lithium by Shura Ehrlichman, which I found through Ghost Residues on Instagram, who was previously known as Berlin Slag, and before that was Henry Defense Squad. This is an account run by a girl named Becky. She previously posted a lot of dark academia and literature stuff, but she then took a shift to focus more on creative pursuits, especially writing. But one of the things that I really love is that she does mini book reviews on her Instagram stories, and this was a book that she reviewed, said it was absolutely fantastic, and I was intrigued by it. This is a collection of poetry penned as a love letter to bipolar disorder, specifically to Lithium, which is the medication that the author uses to manage their bipolar disorder, and I thought this was a fascinating concept, and you know I like poetry, and I thought it would be a really, really interesting collection. The benefit of having this book as well is that not only does it fulfill the challenge of read a book in one day, if I so manage to, but also that it fills out the challenge of read a book recommended by a booktuber or book reviewer, because Ghost Residue recommended this. So brilliant. This is knocking me down 2 challenges today, hopefully 3 if you include me finishing Common Bonds, so very excited to get on with this. Woo! Books arrived! Hello, I am back again. I have just finished reading What a Time to Be Alone by Chidera Egeru. This was an experience, a little bit underwhelming if I'm honest. This was very, very quick and easy to read. It is a huge amount of graphic design with some writing in it. If I just show you a couple of pages, like, this is the amount of text versus images that you're getting. So very, very quick and easy, and I would say it's broadly good stuff as well. What a Time to Be Alone is Chidera's way of showing you how you can live a fulfilling life without needing to rely on people-pleasing or toxic relationship dynamics in order to fulfill yourself. So it's a lot of sort of self-help and motivational stuff that is mostly aimed at people who rely heavily on others for their own happiness and things like that. However, I don't think this was a book I needed, to be honest. I think it's great for other people who need this kind of thing, but I've been in therapy for 3 years, and all the things that she was saying, I was there going, yep, that's great, but I've already heard it from my therapist, so not what I needed, as it turns out, but I think it is clearly a good thing if the only problem I had with it was stuff I'd already heard from therapy. So I think it is therefore a very, very good way for people who want to start exploring this kind of, you know, prioritising yourself, centering yourself in your own life, but for people who can't get that through therapy or through personal stuff like that, I think it would be a good alternative, or at least a good starting point. I'm not ever going to claim that a book is better than going to therapy, but I think this works as a fairly good starting point slash initial substitute if it is something you are interested in looking at. So yeah, I have no problem with it. It's just I'd kind of heard it all before, and because it is obviously more generalised because it's in a book, I was there going, some of this doesn't apply to me, a little bit of it does, but again, I've heard it before. Yeah, I think it would be great for other people. just wasn't really worth me reading it. However, this does mean that I have ticked off the challenge of reading a book in its entirety in one day. It barely took me 2 hours to read that, and I was reading it in between watching some YouTube videos at the same time, so it really is a very quick read if you are a fast reader like I am. But yeah, that challenge is ticked off. However, as I said before, Odes to Lithium arrived today, and this was the book that I was intending to read as my read a book in one day challenge, because it also coincided with the read a book recommended by someone you interact with online. So I think I'm going to attempt to do that as well. I think this is actually going to take me longer to get through, even though it is only 80 pages, because I had a little flick through, and for poetry the writing is pretty dense. And because I am someone who really savours poetry, I expect to take some time in between reading sections or poems just to collect my thoughts and have a think about it. So yeah, I'm excited to read some poetry as well. It's been a while since I've read just a collection of poetry. I generally consume my poetry online, and so I read individual poems in single sittings rather than sitting down with a collection of poetry written by one person. So this will be interesting, and I'm really interested in how the subject matter of bipolar disorder, and in particular being medicated for it, will be portrayed in this. So I will go downstairs and start reading that. Hello, it has been a while since I filmed that time-lapse, and in that time I have lain on my bed for 25 minutes, so I'm feeling distinctly sleepy now, but I finished Odes to Lithium by Shira Erkman. Oh my god, this was phenomenal. This collection was so carefully put together and so carefully thought out, and absolutely stunning in everything it said. It explores a whole load of different ideas around illness and wellness and healthcare systems and relationships with other people while you are recovering, with being in a psychiatric ward, with leaving the psychiatric ward, with telling other people about it, and all these different things. But running through every single poem is this love for the lithium, for the thing that is keeping her healthier. And I really, really liked it. It was such a unique take on mental illness to actually be praising your medication. When I went on Storygraph, I saw this review which I thought put it perfectly in just a sentence and said something along the lines of, "I love the idea of romanticising your healing rather than romanticising this dark thing that you deal with." And it's so true. There are so many different poems in this exploring so many different facets of her experiences. And yet throughout there is never this feeling that she wants to go back to really, really struggling with her bipolar disorder. It is always this push towards healing and feeling better and being herself. And I really, really liked that. I thought this was so carefully put together, so beautifully written. It's not difficult to read, but there is this absolutely wonderful imagery that reminded me in a way of Sylvia Plath, quite ironically. You know, Sylvia Plath is the epitome of sort of romanticising your despair, and this collection feels quite akin to that kind of writing, but in no way deals with the same subjects in the same way. And I loved it. I thought it was fantastic, and that is a second book that I have read today. I am just knocking down these challenges. This is the third book I've actually finished today, the second that I've read in its entirety today, and I have now read a book that was recommended by a booktuber or book reviewer. That is my reading done for today. I am tired, I'm also experiencing some anxiety symptoms, so I'm going to take some time for myself the rest of the evening, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give it a like if you did. I always ask you to comment something at the end of my videos because I'm genuinely interested in engaging with the people who watch my videos. The problem is I've been making a video every single day this week, and so it's meant my questions have been a little bit repetitive, but hey, tell me something, chat to me, I'm genuinely interested. If you're new here, feel free to subscribe if you want to see more of my bookish content. I am making a video every single day this week until Saturday as part of the Sunshine Readathon, so I will see you again tomorrow.